What's up, everybody? Robert Rule of 2 Review here, and today I ask the question, are we maybe starting to see games in development just a little too early? All right, well, first you'll probably notice that you're watching some Mario Kart 8 footage, which is pretty fantastic. The game has been out for about 2 or 3 days now, and of course, the little bit of free time I have, I've only been able to play that. I haven't been able to get my hands off of it. The game is fantastic. It's wonderful. It's as good as you've heard. It's as good as you could ever hope or expect coming from Nintendo and from a brand new HD next-gen Mario Kart game and experience. The game is badass. It's also really goddamn hard, especially in 150cc. The AI in this game is better than it's ever been in any of the series, which is a great thing. And it's awesome that the game has more of a challenge than it ever has before. But of course, that typical Mario Kart frustration just keeps coming in, and it's just an unstoppable force. You just kind of have to deal with it, put your head down and barrel forward and just run with it, because that is what Mario Kart is. What you're watching, the footage you're going to be watching here is going to be of the special cup of the brand new courses, the brand new cups, because of course every Mario Kart game comes with 4 cups that are, redos of old courses from previous Mario Kart games. And then there's 4 cups of all brand new courses. And that's always the best. So this is the final cup of the new courses you're watching me play. It's my first attempt at this course, this cup, so try not to judge me. And you're going to see me do pretty darn well and then just get rocked at the end. I'm not going to spoil it any more than that. It is so tragic, and you will hopefully see. I'll make sure to talk long enough to cover the whole length of the cup. God damn it, it's just such a tragic end to a great experience. So anyway, enjoy the Mario Kart 8 footage, and now on to the good stuff. Okay, well, today's an interesting and kind of fun one. It's kind of one of my little theoretical pieces, which I always like to do on occasion. Not about any sort of specific news per se, just something that it is certainly relevant to some recent happenings in the industry, but it's gotten my brain thinking about, just some other kind of larger topics at hand, and I kind of wanted to just touch base on that, share my theories and see what it is you guys thought. So the other big game besides Mario Kart that, of course, came out this last week was Watch Dogs for most systems, basically all platforms except for the Wii U, which we know that one is getting its release sometime, probably in the fall or so, another couple of months, which is the version I'm waiting to play. So I should preface this conversation because Watch Dogs is the game sparking the conversation, although I won't really spend much time on it. It should also be known that I myself have not played it because I'm waiting to get the Wii U version. So I'm not speaking from a personal standpoint, just based on the overall reaction from the community, gamers, and the industry about Watch Dogs. And so when talking about Watch Dogs, which is again just a very brand new release, it has not even been out a week yet. Watch Dogs is the game that has had a tremendous amount of hype. First showed to us at E3 2012 with an amazing stage demo from Ubisoft's press conference that totally blew our minds. It got us all very excited for the game. A brand new IP and property, very big budget from a huge company. They spent a lot of time saying, this is our brand new thing that we're going to use to propel a lot of our decisions going forward from Ubisoft. And it was great. I mean, the demo was awesome. I loved it just as much as probably most of you did. And I've been very excited for the game, and I still am very excited for the game. You fast forward a couple of years, you go through E3 last year where the game was shown and it felt a little bit less impressive. Then you start going to even more recently, around the end of last year, beginning of this year, there was the announcement of the delay where it was supposed to come out in November, and then it got delayed till just now, like I said, a couple of days ago, May 2014. We started to see some more glimpses of the game, some trailers, some gameplay footage, and people started to kind of worry about it, A, because of the delay, and B, because of the footage, people feeling like it wasn't quite matching up to what it was that we saw at the E3 demo 2 years ago, 2012, both from a gameplay standpoint and more importantly from a graphics standpoint. I've made a couple of videos touching on Watch Dogs over the last 6 or 7 months since I started the channel, since I started Rule of 2 Review here, and it's been a very polarizing topic for a lot of people. Watch Dogs has become a very controversial subject, and I certainly can sort of see why. I think it's been blown out of proportion, but I also kind of see where people are coming from. So, the crux of the argument is that the game looked amazing and spectacular when we saw it in 2012, and then when you saw the last couple of months worth of trailers and footage, and now that the game has finally been out and reviewed and people have been playing it, A lot of people, mostly the gamers, the industry and reviewers haven't been talking about it this way, but gamers have been really down on it, saying it doesn't look as good. The graphics have been downgraded. Both the next gen and last gen versions don't seem to be matching up to what it was we saw at E3 2012, and it's not as good as what we thought, and the gameplay doesn't look as good. The game is a disappointment, blah, 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 blah. All these kinds of things. You've probably heard a lot of it. I definitely would be curious to anyone who has been playing it what your thoughts are, so please leave your comments on this whole subject below if you have it and have been playing it. So what I have to kind of say is, again, I have not played or seen it myself in person, so remember that I'm coming at it from that perspective. But what I have seen, I sort of agree to a point. I mean, not to the point where it really bothers me that I think the game maybe isn't matching up to what we saw in 2012, and it's also not hindering my excitement, and I still can't wait to get my Wii U version. And maybe that's kind of partly because the Wii U version, I'm more excited to play that game using the gamepad than I am to just play it for the regular experiences everyone else on the regular systems are playing it on. And I don't really care as much about the graphics overall. Like, I like good graphics, but I've said it myriad times on previous videos. I'm not a graphics guy overall. It doesn't sell me on the game experience as much as the game experience sells me on the game experience. So if the graphics don't match up to what we saw, like that, it's not going to bother me too much. But that doesn't mean that I can't still acknowledge and agree with the fact that, yeah, I think maybe more than I first realized a couple months ago, that it might not be living up to what we saw visually. And it sounds like the gameplay isn't really living up to what the gameplay first showed us in 2012. So, what does this really mean for Watch Dogs? But more importantly, what does this mean for gaming overall? And so therein lies the point to the video and what it was that I wanted to get to today. Are we maybe seeing games just a little bit too early? I'm really kind of disappointed in how Watch Dogs' whole release and development schedule played out. And it kind of makes me wonder if, we saw the game in 2012. We saw it revealed in 2012. Then we saw a little bit more at E3 2013. And then a couple of months later, October, November, when it was supposed to launch, that would have basically been, we saw it a year ago. A year later, the game comes out. People wouldn't have had that much time to really dissect and sort of see all these huge differences in what the game was a year prior by the time it actually released. Not to mention, maybe Ubisoft had, a better build that they, that was obviously not indicative of the final product that they showed us a year prior. And maybe they didn't really need to show us that. Maybe they just showed us the game too early. And when you think about how this has happened quite a few times, Aliens Colonial Marines, of course, is the really big one everyone thinks about, where they obviously showed that game way too early. They were showing all this beta footage and early development stuff that was very much, they said, a work in progress. This is not indicative of the final game. And it ultimately kind of didn't matter that wasn't indicative of the final game. Or I should say, sorry, it didn't matter that we knew it wasn't indicative of the final game, because by the time it came out, it ruined itself. They definitely were not at a point where they should have showed us that game, or at least so much footage of it to try to get us excited of what the game could be like. And I feel like that with Watch Dogs, other things that we've seen over the years, I'm trying to kind of, remember some other titles that we've seen that it's really been this way. But it's definitely kind of becoming a trend. And it's the fear, I think, that we might all start to be seeing, live out kind of soon, is that we might never be able to trust whatever early previews we're seeing of big upcoming titles, especially the kind of stuff that we see at big conventions like E3. The Order 1886, that's another really big one recently, where I can guarantee you that game just recently announced to be delayed. I don't think it's going to be nearly as good. And I mean, good isn't really ideal. I just don't think that the final product that we see of that game is going to be anything that we've seen from the game so far. What we saw at E3 last year compared to the 2 gameplay footage demos that we've seen released on the internet over the last couple of months now, honestly, I think that game has been looking less and less good and less exciting to most people, myself included. Now, that's a game where, that's a game where I was never overall very excited about it. Other than that, I really like Ready at Dawn, the studio. But for some reason, the game wasn't grabbing me in concept. And then when I've seen the gameplay footage twice since it's been revealed, it's now even less exciting. Like, what that game is turning out to be is not turning out to be very great. And it kind of makes me wonder if they maybe showed that game too early, especially considering that we just heard the game is getting delayed till next year to 2015. What was initially supposed to be one of the potential big tentpole releases for the PlayStation 4 this year, 2014, has now been delayed. And we know they're going to continue to work on it and tweak on it. And I think what we might be seeing is a trend where normally you would think a game, when it gets more development time, is going to just improve over and over again as we get closer and closer to its release. And maybe we're starting to see that when that happens, it's because they start off too ambitious and they have too much of a good idea of what they want it to be. And then they show it when they're really excited to say, hey, look, this is this great big new game and experience we're getting ready to show you. But as they start to work more and more on it, they realize maybe they're more limited by whatever hardware they're doing, especially if it's a multi-platform, because they have to make it, feasible and workable and playable to the best expectations amongst all these different pieces of hardware that all have different levels of what they're able to do and different strengths, Whereas the PlayStation 4 is the graphics, the Xbox One was kind of the graphics, kind of just its online interface. The Wii U, it's mostly the controller and the gamepad. PC, it's a myriad of different things because people can have, different kinds of setups and better graphics card than processors or vice versa going on. So there's just this whole kind of mess of things going on. And Watch Dogs kind of plays into that too, because that's something that released on every conceivable platform. PC, next gen, last gen. So there's all these different things going on. How do you make it run the best on all these different platforms? The Order 1886 is an example of a game that is exclusive to the PlayStation, so that's kind of a benefit. They should be knowing exactly what architecture and infrastructure they're working on from the get-go to make sure that they can maximize only what the one system can do. And if you notice, history has always showed us that the best games overall are the ones that are exclusive to any individual platform. Those are the ones that get the most out of that platform, out of its control structure, out of the online infrastructure, and out of just the overall processing power of said system. So that's always the benefit. So the Order 1886 does probably have the benefit of overall turning out the most like its initial reveal, but it just seems like that, along with Watch Dogs and Aliens and other things, we just might be seeing games too early. And I feel like because of the internet and the way we consume our games and our gaming media so quickly, that developers might almost feel forced to do so. And so obviously that's also another pretty big question going on here is, do developers need to feel forced to, show us stuff as soon as possible? Or is it maybe even when it comes to something like E3 specifically, which is all these games were revealed initially at an E3, is it maybe a case where the console developers are so anxious to try to show they have all these big upcoming things coming out for their consoles and for their hardware soon? Let's just show something as soon as we can possibly get it, to the conference, on the show floor, to people at home, streaming on the internet, so we can say, look, this game, it's going to be a good game, so just get excited because here it is, and then there's a fucking logo and a CG trailer, and now the game, so buy our system, And I get that because I've talked about E3 many times, and I love the excitement of E3, and we love those E3 reveals. So this is certainly not saying that those need to go away, but maybe we just, developers and console manufacturers, when planning their E3 press conferences, need to be just a little bit more cognizant and aware of the development cycle of these games, and don't try to push stuff out too early, because we could possibly be seeing the beginning of a trend where everyone's backing themselves into a corner and they feel like they need to show stuff way too early just because it exists, and they end up, kind of screwing themselves. I think that Skyward Sword is kind of a good example of a game that sort of did this stuff right and sort of did it wrong. It was a combination of maybe showing the gameplay stuff too early, because we know the E3 demo that didn't really go well for the controls, that was sort of showing that it was maybe too early to show that game being played on stage. But when it was first revealed, it was just a piece of concept art. So they didn't show too much early. And ultimately, by that time that game came out, it lived up to its expectations and more so. The controls were perfect. The game was amazing. But we did have the early press conference that showed it, a little bit too early. But the fact that they were willing to show just a logo, just a piece of concept art, and that's it, they didn't back themselves into a corner at that time, because it was just here. The game is coming, and that's all you need to see right now. And that got everyone excited. That's all we needed to know. I'm not going to spend too much time relating that to this upcoming E3 in just over a week's time, where we know they're going to show us Zelda. I don't want to speculate on how much Zelda we're going to see or of any other game. But I do think that it's important to note we don't need to force these games out too early. The way development cycles are now, the way the internet gives us information right away, the way the conferences happen, and the way things can change apparently so quickly in the development cycles of these games, Don't do it until you know you're going to show something that really is the game we will be spending our $60 for once it comes out. Don't screw yourself. Don't screw the games. Don't screw the developers spending their time, money, and blood and sweat making these games as good as they can. When it comes to Watch Dogs, I know it may not be living up to what we first saw at E3 2012, but you know what? Everyone at Ubisoft spent a lot of time to make the best game possible, and I'm sure that Watch Dogs released as the best games it could have possibly been. And I'm okay with that. And yes, I'm saying that from the perspective of somebody who hasn't played it. And yes, I'm waiting for my Wii U version. And yes, my Wii U version has kind of a little extra benefit going for it that people who aren't playing the Wii U version don't have in that controller. But I still stand by what I'm saying. Even if you're playing the PS3, the PS4, or the Xbox One version, or whatever version you're playing, they made a really good game. I'm sure of it. I know they did the best they could to make it look as good as they could and play as good as it can, as well as it can. And I think that they deserve credit for bringing us basically risking and taking that risk by spending so much time and money on a brand new IP, something we don't get very often in this industry anymore, especially in a AAA sense. Indie sense, yes, we do, but not so much on the AAA side. So it's great that we just have this game to play. I think people should just, hopefully just step back and appreciate Watch Dogs for the game it is. But at the same time, developers and console manufacturers, do not force this stuff out too early, because obviously we're kind of all seeing what happens when that backlash is created. All right, well, that's it for today, guys. Thanks for listening and tuning in for my kind of theory on game development and if we see games too early. Of course, if you like what I'm doing and you like Rule of Two Review and you have not yet subscribed, you can please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out big time. You can follow the links below to the Facebook page where I do post kind of questions, fun things, and post the new videos as they come up. And if you like the video, you can like it, you can share it, share your comments and your thoughts about any of this stuff in Watch Dogs below. And thanks for tuning in. I will catch you next time.